And it's episode 9 of the Neoncast. How you guys doing? Took another 2-week break, but this week is going to be a little busy, and it's also going to be a little different. See, it's now Friday night, and I'm going to record a segment, and then I'm going to watch Batman v Superman tomorrow, and after that I'm going to record another segment about that. Maybe with someone, maybe with someones, or maybe I'm just going to be a lazy fuck and do it by myself. But, yeah, so it's going to be like a two-parter. I mean, I'm going to edit this together, so it's going to be one thing, but I don't know how long it's going to run. So I'm not going to waste too much time just talking about random stuff. I'm just going to say that the reviews of Batman v Superman are not good. But I'm sure I'm going to expand on that in the next segment. I know that Man of Steel is very divisive. I like it. I have problems with it, but they're not the problems that it's sort of famous for. I have different issues with it. I don't think that the sort of conventional wisdom of why people dislike it is something that I necessarily sort of subscribe to. But yeah, so I don't think there's too much news. There was an X-Men Apocalypse trailer and also a Warcraft trailer, both of which just haven't really grabbed me. I mean, Apocalypse looks okay. I'm sure it's going to be fine. I mean, those First Class movies are all right. To me, the biggest mistake that they make is they focus too much on Jennifer Lawrence, the actress, and Mystique, the character, because Jennifer Lawrence is so popular. And I just find that character to not be super interesting, and also not, because I grew up on the X-Men cartoon, not particularly the character that I would want that much focus on at the expense of characters that I grew up loving, like Cyclops and Rogue and Storm and even Gambit, and Wolverine, obviously. But we've had plenty of Wolverine. But you know, those like core X-Men. So yeah, but like I said, I'm sure it's gonna be fine. I love Oscar Isaac, and he's playing Apocalypse, and I think it's gonna be perfectly serviceable. But I don't know. I think this year is a real rough year. I mean, we got a Star Wars movie coming out. We got Civil War that looks like it's going to be just massively great. And we got Batman v Superman, which, despite its poor reviews, and it's probably going to be as controversial as Man of Steel, if not more, it's probably going to do pretty well. And it is buzz generating, whereas I don't think that Apocalypse is generating a lot of buzz. And the same thing can be said about Warcraft, a movie that someone said to me they thought was about a decade too late, and that's not a bad assessment of it. To me, the only thing that still has me on board is the fact that it was made by Duncan Jones. He's David Bowie's son, and he made a couple of really, really good movies. I mean, he made a movie that was fantastic called Moon with Sam Rockwell, and then he made a movie that was good called Source Code with Jake Gyllenhaal and Michelle Monaghan, and that movie's also pretty good. It's pretty damn good. It's kind of not really discussed. It's a little bit forgotten, maybe unjustly. I like that movie. It's all right. And he does interesting things. He's not just a bland, no-name director who's just going to make a generic, bland sort of fantasy epic. So, and yet that's sort of what it looks like. So I don't know. But yeah, the point is, like, this is a bad year to put out a movie of that sort if it's not, you know, like up in the like the range of a 10. If it's in the range of like a 6 or a 7, this year is really bad for it. Excuse me. So yeah, those trailers were all right, I guess. People still just sort of obsessed with Civil War, and now there's all this speculation about when we're going to get a Rogue One trailer and all that stuff. But I'm going to forego that talk, and I'm going to talk about Daredevil, season 2, which was released on Netflix last week, and I kind of blew by it in the space of a weekend. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit non-spoilery, general review, I guess, and then maybe I'll get into a little bit of spoilery details, and then because there's going to be stuff after that, I'll make sure to like time code all this stuff and be like, you know, you can skip to such and such time code. I'll put it in the description, and I'll let you know, like, you know, how much you got to skip if you haven't seen the whole thing yet. So yeah, season 2 of Daredevil. Look, I was a little late to the Daredevil party because I remember watching the first episode back when it was kind of new, and I wasn't super impressed. It looked kind of procedural. It looked like it was going to be Law and Order, just with a superhero, and I was just like, eh. So I just set it aside, you know? And then I actually watched Jessica Jones first when that came out, because the trailers to that made it look really interesting. And after that, I went back and I watched Daredevil, and I loved it. I thought it was great. Very artistic, very sort of, a lot of thought goes into the framing and the coloring and the shots. It has the first season, a very famous long take hallway shot, which is something I'm a huge fan of, because it's cool in itself, but also because to me, long shots like that, long elaborate shots, are a good sign that the people making the movie wanted to do something special. Because those are really hard to do. They take a lot of work and a lot of effort in pre-planning, especially when it's something like a fight where you're kicking indoors. If you watch Spectre, which is a terrible movie, by the way, but it starts with an amazing long shot. And you know what? Spectre's a bad movie, but it's a bad movie that had a lot of sincere artistic effort put into it. The problem with Spectre is it has a bad story. It's not a poorly directed movie. It's not a poorly shot movie. It's just a poorly conceived movie. But watching Daredevil and seeing how it had that, I don't know, it sort of has sort of comic booky colors. There's always this kind of jaundiced yellow light that's kind of seeping in through the windows. There's always this play of light and shadow. It's a very distinct looking show, kind of like how Breaking Bad was very distinct in that if you turned on the TV and Breaking Bad was on, you'd be like, oh, that's Breaking Bad. I can recognize it just by looking at it. Daredevil kind of had that as well. It was it had very distinct visuals, and it was good. I mean, it was a good show, and it was interesting, and it took that sort of mythos that people know, and even the people who aren't Daredevil comic fans, such as myself, but just kind of know the character from a little bit from here and there, and also from the sort of ill-fated movie with Ben Affleck and Michael Clark Duncan and Jennifer Garner and Colin Farrell. Sort of know those characters. I mean, I knew Kingpin, the character of Kingpin, because of Spider-Man, not because of Daredevil, because of the Spider-Man cartoon. So I knew who Kingpin was. And then when the Daredevil movie came out, so like I was like, oh, Kingpin, I know that's a Marvel Universe character or whatever. And I know that he's a big guy and he's strong in it. And here they Vincent D'Onofrio did a really, really good job making him into this really weird, really disturbed character, as opposed to just being evil man who's a big evil man and does evil things. They made him, like I said, interesting. I think it's interesting. It's funny because I think the Joker, the Heath Ledger Joker, kind of was a groundbreaker in how people think about comic book and even not comic book villains, because the Joker actually influenced non-comic book villains that came later. If you look at Javier Bardem's character in Skyfall, he's very Joker. It's always like, we gotta find this we gotta make a character, we gotta make our villain a character. He needs to be interesting. He needs to be someone who's captivating. And that's something, by the way, that the Marvel Cinematic Universe hasn't really gotten done yet well. Their villains are very bland. It's always like, well, Loki was a villain like 3 times. But it's always like evil man. You know, like in The Winter Soldier. The Winter Soldier is a good villain, but he's not a character. The character is like, I don't know who it's supposed to be, whatever, the nameless Hydra and the secretary who's played by Robert Redford and whatever. And then you got your Thor, the Dark World. Again, it's like Loki and others. And so they tried to do that with Ultron in Age of Ultron. They were like, we're going to make an interesting villain, and we're going to get a good actor who can act. I mean, like, who can act, who can put an attitude into it and stuff. And that was all right. I wasn't I think he did a good job, James Spader. I wasn't in love with the character of Ultron. He was a little too goofy, a little too, I don't know how to explain it. But that paradigm shift that came with the Heath Ledger Joker and is probably going to feed into the Jared Leto Joker in Suicide Squad, and also Lex Luthor in Batman v Superman from the trailers. I'm just saying. I'm just judging by the trailers. And also Kilgrave in Jessica Jones. A villain that has personality, that's likable in his evilness. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's someone you're scared of, but you're also very fond of, because they're so compelling. And I thought that Kingpin was a very good example of that. I mean, he's not charming and he doesn't deliver like slick one-liners or whatever. He's almost like on the spectrum, and he always has this like visibly like he has this like inner turmoil, and then when that inner turmoil kind of explodes in these moments of like sheer violence, it's very, very scary and very effective. So yeah, loved season 1, and here it's not perfect. It has a bit of pacing issue because it's not really, it doesn't really have enough story for how long the season is, so it kind of drags a little in places. And that's actually something I thought the second season did better. There's more going on. I think the strongest thing about season 2 is that it wasn't just a repeat. It wasn't just, here's Kingpin again, he's out of prison and we're going to do a thing, or conversely, like, oh, here's the replacement for Kingpin. He's also a mega villain, and how are we going to take him down? It wasn't that. There were multiple things going on, and it faded in and out of those multiple things, and they were all interconnected, and just a good, still maybe a little too long for how much story it was, but far less noticeable than in the first season. New characters that you obviously know about, the 2 big ones, Elektra and Punisher, both done well. I found Elektra to be a little annoying. She kind of grew on me. At first I was like, she's supposed to be alluring and sexy, and I guess that is the point, but she is a bit of a grating character, I thought, at first, but then as time goes on, I kind of got what they were going for. And Punisher. So John Bernthal, who's an actor I like a lot from Walking Dead, he was also in the movie Sicario, which I didn't love, but I loved him in it. And other things, really, really nails this and is probably the best thing about it. I think he is perfect. I mean, this is true for Walking Dead and also for Sicario. He's perfect in portraying like a regular guy who's, I'll put it this way. he's like a likable guy that you then grow to hate in both Walking Dead and in Sicario. Here it's the reverse. Here he's this crazy violent guy that you grow to like as you kind of get to know him, but not entirely. I'm going to get into it a little bit in a few minutes when I kind of go into spoilers. But he really sells this character who is deeply damaged by something that happened to him. I mean, if you know the Punisher character at all, the mythos of the Punisher is largely the same everywhere, which is that his family was all murdered, and now he goes out and he kills criminals because criminals kill his family. You know, there were a couple of Punisher movies, and that's basically his storyline. He's also, by the way, an Easter egg character in previous Marvel movies. In The Winter Soldier, there's 2 scenes in which a yellow Penske truck kind of helps out the good guys, quote unquote. When Nick Fury's being chased by the cop cars, they get T-boned by a Penske truck, and then later on the highway, there's that guy, the Hydra guy, and they throw him out, and then he gets hit by a Penske truck. The Russo brothers, who made Winter Soldier, pretty much said flat out that was the Punisher driving those trucks. And I could totally see John Bernthal's Punisher kind of fitting into that world. In general, by the way, I think that this season of Daredevil brought it a little closer into the bigger Marvel universe, whereas in the first season it felt a little like it stood a little bit apart. Jessica Jones feels like it stands way apart. Like if I saw Jessica Jones in like Civil War, I'd be like, that's really weird. Now, if I see if I see Daredevil in Civil War and Infinity War, totally makes sense. Like really, for real. Still its own thing. Still its lower level, more grounded a little bit and stuff. But you're almost getting to the point where it's like, yeah, you know, this does make sense that in this Marvel universe where like there are, you know, super powerful gods and like, you know, call it like A-class superheroes fighting like galactic level battles. There's also B and C class superheroes fighting more like localized things. In the anime One Punch Man, which is a very funny and very good crossover anime that a lot of non-anime fans enjoy. It's kind of like a cynical comedy about superheroes. There's like an official class ranking of superheroes. So like it goes S, that's the highest class, and then A, B, C, and D or whatever. And depending on like the level of crisis, they will mobilize, you know, like an S class, an A class, a B class. And then within those classes, you're also ranked. So like you could be like the first ranked in B class. And then if you want to advance, so you become the lowest ranked in A class. That's kind of how this feels. Like Daredevil is like maybe a B or a C. And then like Thor is like an S class. And then Captain America and Iron Man are like maybe A class. You know, like, you know what I mean? Like if you have magical or actual like superpowers, you're like S, and then below that you're like a superhuman or maybe have some kind of super technology. But then you got your like Daredevils who basically like roam the streets and fight lots of ninjas and stuff like that. So yeah, overall very good. Also has lots of cool fights, lots of good stuff going on, and I think you'll really, I mean, if you like the first season, you will absolutely enjoy this a lot. And if you haven't seen the first season, I think these 2 seasons are some really good. They're really violent and there's a lot of raw language in them. They're really nice R-rated Marvel properties. Because I know the Marvel Cinematic Universe people were like, look, we're not impressed by the fact that Deadpool made lots of money, even though it's R-rated. Our thing is not to go down that road. But I like that they actually have this sort of side business going that can be R-rated and can show, you know, some graphic violence and have some more raw, natural language going on. It fits the vibe of Daredevil and stuff. It's a very adult oriented show. So check it out. And So I'm now going to go into a bit of spoilers. I'm probably going to talk for another, I think, 10 minutes, and then I'm gonna turn this off and then fire it back up in a day or two when I got some Batman v Superman comments. And maybe, I don't know yet what I'm going to do. I might edit this back and put in some stuff in the beginning. I didn't really look over news and stuff. I'm a little busy this weekend, so I wasn't gonna. And I knew I had a bunch to say about both Daredevil, and I'm sure I'm going to have a lot to say about Batman v Superman. So I didn't know if I was going to have a lot of time to just go over some news and some of that kind of stuff, casting and such. So yeah, spoilers, and check out the comments below. I'll give you a time code where to hop to listen to Batman v Superman talk, which will also probably be divided into non-spoiler and spoiler talk. I'm not sure yet. Like I said, it depends on what I do. There is a small chance that I'm going to have a whole roundtable discussion with like 3 or 4 people. It's just a little bit of a logistical nightmare to put together. So it really depends on these other people's schedules and what's going to happen. Because I'm actually going to see it with a couple of friends of mine that we spend, many hours watching movies, discussing movies. We watch a lot of bad movies together and dissect why they're bad, and we love to talk about why bad movies are bad and why good movies are good and such. And we're all like good big comic book movie fans and stuff. So here we go, spoiler talk. So I don't know what I want to say in spoilers. I'm going to ruin it. Okay, so let's start with this. There's multiple plot threads going on, right? You got your kingpins in prison. Fisk went away to prison, and now there's other gangs in Hell's Kitchen, which is not Hell's Kitchen, by the way. It's all filmed in like Astoria and Long Island City, which are both in Queens, and also in Greenpoint, which is in North Brooklyn. Like it's the one down, like on the, not that you care, but on the other side of the East River from Manhattan Island, you got your Astoria, and then below that you got your Long Island City, and then below that is where Brooklyn starts with Greenpoint. Has a lot of like docks, decrepit old abandoned dock areas and stuff that look very kind of gritty New York. Astoria and Long Island City are kind of getting gentrified, but still have that gritty New York. Hell's Kitchen is now really ritzy and fancy and really expensive, like all like TV personality. I think Anderson Cooper lives in Hell's Kitchen. It's not shady anymore. So it's funny because I used to live in that area of Queens. So everything is just my neighborhood. Like I recognize all those areas and stuff. And I think it's funny that everyone now thinks that that's Hell's Kitchen when it's actually Astoria. So there's all these gangs and they're vying for control of Hell's Kitchen. There's the biker gang, and you got your Irish gang, and you got your Yakuza, and such. And the Punisher's going around just murdering them horribly, like just machine gunning them to death, in crazy fashion. And you got your Daredevil, and then Elektra comes back into his life. By the way, everybody's good in it who was in the first season. The 3 main characters. You got your Matt Murdock and your Karen Page and your Foggy Nelson. They're all really strong in it. Recurring characters. Didn't know Fisk was going to be in this. Seeing him was a pleasant surprise. Didn't know Stick was going to be in this. Seeing him, pleasant surprise. So yeah, like Elektra comes back into Matt Murdock's life. She needs help with stuff. He helps her. The Yakuza are after her. Turns out it's not the Yakuza, it's the Hand, which is where Stick comes back into the picture. And then it turns out that this is all sort of tied into what the Punisher is doing. A lot of good fights. There's another big sort of hallway fight that's, clearly trying to go after that whole, like, oh, we had a big elaborate fight sequence in the first season, so let's do one here. This one is less less of like a clearly done in a one take thing that has a lot of like false edit points, but still done really, really well and really cool. And it's much longer and much more elaborate. Starts in a hallway, goes down a staircase, through another hallway, and it's done all in one fluid motion that could have been edited down. I actually haven't looked it up. I do know that a lot of people went ape shit for that fight sequence, and rightfully so. It's very good. John Bernthal and Charlie Cox, that's his name, the guy who plays Murdoch. Every time they're together on screen, instant magic, as far as I'm concerned. Their on-screen dynamic was just fantastic. A lot of dialogue between them sounded natural to the point that I felt that it was maybe ad-libbed, meaning that maybe they knew essentially what they were supposed to say to each other, but the way they play off each other felt extremely natural in a way that, like, you know, you listen to dialogue in a show and it sounds natural, but then when you listen to actually the two people talking, once you hear it done really, really naturally, it stands out. You go like, wow, that really sounded like two people like having an argument, like a real argument where they kind of step on top of each other. It's not like I speak and now I'm done talking and now you talk, especially when people are arguing. They tend to kind of fade in and out of each other's stuff and talk over each other and stuff, and especially the scene where the Punisher kind of traps Daredevil and kind of chains him to like a chimney pipe, and they have this whole discussion. He duct tapes a gun to his hand and tells him to kill him, and they have this long elaborate discussion about, you know, the Punisher basically says to Daredevil, like, you and I are the same, except I have the balls to actually kill people and you don't. And just the way that whole dialogue plays out feels so natural. And then again, they interact a couple of other times. They have this fight where Daredevil goes to rescue the Punisher Frank Castle, of course, who's trapped by the Irish. And every time they're together interacting, it's just the best stuff ever. And like I said, Bernthal, slowly when you get to know Castle, because he's just a psycho, but then slowly you see a little bit of his like human side, and you just start to like him despite the fact that he's a psycho, which, like I said, is Bernthal's specialty. Walking Dead, Sicario, same kind of deal, where it's like this guy's a monster, but he's telling kind of a cute story about his kid, and you can't help but like him. So as I said, Vincent D'Onofrio is back in this, not in a huge role, but he plays sort of an important part in the grander story. As I said, this has multiple plot lines that kind of fade in and out of each other, more so than the first season, which was basically there's the Kingpin and we got to take down the Kingpin. And here it's like you got the Hand and they're against Elektra, and then you got the Punisher who's going around and killing gangs, and then he's on trial, and then you got Fisk who's in prison trying to take over the prison, and then you got Karen Page. Later it splits up, and Karen Page is trying to figure out stuff about the Punisher, and Daredevil is off with Elektra, and Foggy is doing his own thing. Like, there's a lot of different. And also the night nurse, what's her name? Carol, is that it? Rosario Dawson, who's also in Jessica Jones. There's actually a couple of interesting crossovers with Jessica Jones here. They even mention her by name. And also Foggy is interviewed by Hogarth, Carrie Ann Moss, who's the lawyer from Jessica Jones. So there's a lot of they're starting to kind of cross over. They're slowly building towards the Defenders, which is going to be Daredevil and Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, which was recently cast, and Luke Cage, who's from Jessica Jones and is now getting his own show. There was a teaser for it. So those four are slowly kind of moving together because they're going to be like it's like a kind of like a mini Defenders. You know how I said like S class, A class, like hero rankings. So these are like, like the B class Avengers, like low level, doing their own, like, cleaning up the streets as opposed to cleaning up like the galaxy, So yeah, good fights. Oh, and another thing I loved about this is that it's slowly bleeding more into mysticism. The whole Hand versus the I can't remember what Styx's organization is called. The Pursued, the whatever. It's like this ancient war. There's this whole idea because Nobu is back. Nobu was killed, and all of a sudden Nobu's back. And Murdoch's like, I don't understand. I watched Nobu burn to death, and all of a sudden he's back. How can this be? Even though that's a pet peeve of mine, that in a world where like aliens came out of a wormhole and they were fought by an Asgardian god and a guy who turns into a giant green monster, like, would anything seem impossible to you if you lived in a world like that? You'd see a guy who you saw die alive and you'd be like, well, I guess we also have resurrection in our crazy world that has aliens and gods and people in robot suits and super soldiers who've been alive since World War II. The fact that he kind of refuses to even entertain the possibility that, you know, the Hand actually has a resurrection machine, which, spoiler alert, they have a resurrection machine. But that's what I like. I like that it's now kind of getting to that point where it's the supernatural is starting to enter into this mythology. There's another anime that I'll reference right here called Samurai Flamenco, which is a very crazy sort of celebration and homage to a lot of like Japanese Super Sentai superhero shows and stuff like that. And it, for a while, establishes itself as a, you know, there's this guy, he loved all these like his Power Ranger type shows. That's what Super Sentai is, like these like superhero TV shows. And he decides he's going to become a superhero like that and goes around, you know, just beating up criminals and just being like a bumbling guy. And it, for a while, established itself as just that. And then all of a sudden, it gets this whole like supernatural aspect introduced into it. And that's very cool. And that's kind of what this is doing. I hear a lot of people said that this felt a little bit like a setup season for what's going to happen next. And that's not a bad description. I don't think it takes away from it. It's still very fun. But it does end on a slightly anticlimactic note, because it's setting up bigger things to come later. But that was fine. Like I said, I felt that it had a fairly powerful sort of narrative. It had a lot of good action. It had a lot of good performances. And overall, just a really good watch. And, you know, like I said, drags less than the first season and brings this slightly closer into the fold of the Marvel universe in general. And I think that's all I'm going to say about that. And that's my Marvel talk for this. And as I said, I'll probably insert like a drop here, like one of those like, you know, from like the Batman 60s TV show. And when I come back, it'll be Sunday, I think. And we will discuss the movie Batman v Superman. I might, you know what? I'll say one thing about it before I cut, because it'll be kind of interesting to see what I say now and then what I say after I've seen it. I think that this movie suffers greatly from the fact that we knew it was coming for 3 years. This movie was announced in 2013. And we've already seen it. They spent $150 million marketing this movie in possibly the worst way I've ever seen, which is show us everything, do a million product tie-ins to the point that it's really obnoxious. And I think a strategy like that can only work if your movie really works. Like Star Wars did that. We knew Star Wars was coming for a long time. We actually knew that Star Wars was coming basically since 2012 when Disney bought Lucasfilm, and they also marketed the crap out of it and did a bazillion product tie-ins to the point that I really got annoyed at all these like car commercials. I think I mentioned this on a previous episode where you would turn on the TV and go like dun 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 Toyota. You know, it was like, ugh, shut up. I'm never buying a car ever. But that movie is charming and awesome, and the characters, like, it was almost to the point where you didn't need to be kept in the dark. You didn't need, like, it was fine to be bombarded with all of that marketing, because in the end the movie was so much fun. And also, to their credit, they kept a lot of stuff secret, whereas I don't feel like there's a lot of stuff that we haven't seen in this movie. I might be wrong. You know what? I might be wrong. I just feels like it. It feels like they're saying, look, here's everything that's going to happen in the movie. You're not going to care that you know what's going to happen because the meat of it is so good. But from what I'm hearing, that's just not true. But more on that after I see it, because I have a lot to say with regards to Man of Steel and with regards to the DC cinematic universe going forward, especially with regards to Zack Snyder, Christopher Nolan, Feige over at Marvel, and how they do their stuff, etc. So hit it, Johnny. So here we are. It's actually Saturday, not Sunday. And I just got back from watching Batman v Superman, Dawn of the Justice. Okay. This is going to be hard. I wanted to do this immediately and instead of waiting for the next day, because I don't know, I have a lot of thoughts, and everyone's talking about it today, because I guess everyone saw it today or yesterday. And it's not easy to explain what it is about this movie. It's gonna be a little difficult. There's just a lot to unpack. It's very, very dense, and not in a good way. I mean, it works to its detriment, the fact that it's so dense. So I'm going to say some non-spoilery things, and then I'll get to more plot spoilers and stuff of that nature later. And once again, down in the description box of this video, I'll put in time codes and stuff so you know if you can jump around and whatnot. So I saw the movie in question, and a few of the things that I was very concerned about were realized in a big way. They did too much too soon. I know DC was very eager to kickstart their own cinematic universe in the vein of Marvel's, and they made a bunch of big mistakes in how they went about doing that. First off, they decided to do this after Man of Steel came out, which involved a retconning of Man of Steel to be a Superman movie that takes place in a DC cinematic universe. Now, that in itself is not terrible. I actually think that one of the best things about this movie is conceptually how it sets up Superman as he is in this world, and the dynamic between Superman and Batman, using the Battle of Metropolis from Man of Steel as like the central crutch of it. And this, you all know, it's all in the trailers. Bruce Wayne in Metropolis during that time, seeing the death and destruction, being involved in it, developing a fear and a sort of a hatred, really, of Superman, and this being the engine of this story. That, I thought, was not a bad idea. I also thought that the controversy surrounding Man of Steel and his killing of Zod and his destruction of Metropolis was a good way to turn Superman into Superman, turn Kal-El into Superman, essentially, by giving him an experience in his life that would be the basis for his then later established ideals that we all know, where he doesn't kill people, and also why it's so important for him to protect people and stuff like that. I thought that was all good in concept, but doing that and also trying to set up this whole Justice Leagues and the cinematic universe, and also shove in a lot of things that you may know about Superman and about Batman and about villains and stuff like that. They just tried to do way too much, and it didn't work. Look, I did not hate this movie. I didn't hate it. It wasn't boring. I didn't feel like it went super long and I was like sitting there and going like, oh, when is this going to end? No, the movie played out. I watched it. I guess I was entertained. I mean, like I said, if it's not boring, it had some nice action. It had some nice visuals. But I did not love anything about it. There's not one thing that I can focus on and go like, aha, that was awesome. And I heard before this, like people said, Affleck is terrific. His Batman is terrific. And you know what? His Batman was perfectly fine. Good even. It had some good dialogue that he clearly wrote. There was one line very early on where I remember hearing that and saying to myself, that's a line that Affleck wrote. Not a doubt in my mind. Something about this isn't a spoiler. Something. It's just a sort of like a metaphor that he used or something. I don't even remember what it was, but it was something like very in the first monologue of it, where I was like, that's an Affleck line. Certainly, it sounds like something out of Good Will Hunting or something out of like a Kevin Smith movie. Something that he would say like in Chasing Amy or something like that. So he does a very good Batman. Jeremy Irons, perhaps my favorite part of this, is Alfred. Wonder Woman, certainly serviceable. Superman, you either like the Superman or you don't like him, and you either like this Lois Lane or you don't like her. I personally don't mind. I know that some people do not like this kind of dour Superman, and like I said, I don't mind that at all. I've never been a particularly big Superman fan, so I don't mind his characterization in this universe. But it's for all of these things together just don't mesh. It's funny because back in the first half of this episode, I was talking about how well John Bernthal and Charlie Cox interact together on screen. And that's contrasted beautifully by how not super cool and awesome are the interactions between Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck in this movie. And yes, there is a Superman-Batman fight, and yes, it's pretty cool, I guess. The 6 seconds of it that you haven't already seen, because we've already seen everything that's in this movie. There's very little in this that you haven't already seen at least some of, which I think is the biggest detriment of this. And I think I said this in the first half of this, but if not, I'll reiterate it. The marketing for this movie was terrible because it showed you way too much. I think I said this. It hung its hat on the movie itself, meaning that like they didn't think that they needed to keep a lot of their visuals or a lot of their plot points mysterious, because they felt like the movie itself would be so strong that even if you knew all the action beats and all of the cool scenes in it and stuff, that wouldn't take away your enjoyment of it. That was a miscalculation. So it ended up not like there's you basically have seen all of this. I mean, some of it you haven't. I'm not gonna go as far as to say like you don't have to. There is stuff that happens in it that we haven't expected. A couple of things maybe even surprising, but overall, what's going to happen in this movie, basically. And I don't know that that's a good thing. I think that Civil War is doing a good job of keeping itself fairly mysterious, and then it can hold a lot of surprises, which I think this lacks severely. So I don't know if I have a ton more to say in the non-spoilery level. I will say this for its credit, okay? It's the worst thing about this is the way the story is conceived and built. Why is that a good thing? Because it means that this universe is not a total loss. These characters, this dynamic between these characters can function. This isn't a lost cause. I mean, if you look at Iron Man 2, which is just a terrible movie, the things in it are good. Tony Stark is good in it. Pepper Potts is good in it. The main characters are good enough so that they can survive one or even two Iron Man 3 bad stories, but they are themselves strong enough characters that when you drop them into an Avengers or an Age of Ultron or a Civil War, they can function well because they're good characters. And I think this Batman is a pretty good Batman, and this Wonder Woman's a pretty good Wonder Woman, this Superman's a pretty good Superman. I do think that there is hope, but they really do have to learn the lessons of what went wrong here. And like I said, I think the biggest thing was that it's this weird, not Justice League, they went too quickly. They did too much too quickly. This could have easily have had another Superman movie and a Batman movie and a Wonder Woman movie, and then you could have done this as like maybe Justice League Part 1, maybe kind of shift it around so like at the end of this, you really get your Justice League, and then like in the second Justice League movie, because there's going to be two of them, much like Infinity War, they're this like established team. Instead, it's this weirdly, hastily established, and even in the movie itself, it does a lot of half-assed things to get us to the point that we can now kind of progress into this DC cinematic universe. So I think that's all I'm going to say right now. Lex Luthor, look, I thought Jesse Eisenberg did a really good acting job, and I thought that the character that he conceived of was an interesting character and an interesting villain. I just don't think it was a good Lex Luthor. And I also think that his role in the story was probably unnecessary in general, but that's a little more of like spoiler talk. So once again, I'm gonna time code this. So we're gonna go into spoilers now. I don't think I'm gonna say much after spoilers. So if you don't want to know spoilers, I mean, if you haven't seen it, or if you don't intend to see it at all, you can keep listening. But if you do, then you can stop now. And I'm at Neon Taster, and the podcast is at Neoncast on Twitter, and also neoncastpod at gmail.com. And I'm going to give a little teensy like a buffer, and then I will proceed with some spoilers. All right. So now that we got rid of all those people who are still holding out hope that they'll enjoy this movie and are going to be bitterly disappointed, we can talk a little about it in detail. So, yeah, it's a mess. This movie's a mess. It's, as I said, it's not boring. You can have some fun. You can watch Batman kick some ass. You can watch big monster fight, and you can watch, some dream sequences and some stuff that you don't understand at all. But I don't know what to say. There's just, as I said in the non-spoilery portion, nothing about this is great. There's nothing about it is even really good. I mean, there's elements of it where I'm like, okay, cool. I like the bat suit. I like the Batman stuff. I actually like the dynamic between Batman and Alfred. I thought first of all, I thought Jeremy Irons, as I said before, is perhaps the best thing about this. A very, very good Alfred, both in the way he acts and his lines and stuff, and also in his function in the world of this Batman. He's like a Q, you see him working on tech. He's also his, but he's done this in other iterations, but also in this one, he's like his backup guy. He's the guy back in the Batcave looking at the monitors and being like, go down 2 flights of stairs and take a left at the second corridor. And that's where the data center is. You got to steal this thing. He's his like backup guy. He pilots the Batwing remotely at some point. He does a lot of that kind of stuff. Their interaction is very good. Superman is the Superman that we know. Lois Lane is the Lois Lane that we know. And as I said, Lex Luthor is a sort of wacky. It's funny because I was talking about Heath Ledger and how there was a paradigm shift with regards to villains. This is a terrific example of the kind of performance that we would never have gotten without Heath Ledger's Joker. I just don't think that it's a good Lex Luthor. He's a very demented, he's very interesting. He has a lot of interesting character choices in this, but not good for this. Not the right fit. Which is interesting because, like I said, like you can have a good character that's well acted and is interesting and is like, this would work better as like a Riddler or maybe even a Joker. Speaking of which, the Joker I'm predicting already now is going to be Jason Todd because of a line of dialogue. I think Batman said something about how nobody stays good or something like that. And in the context of that, it seemed to me like it was hinting that the Joker in Suicide Squad is actually Robin, the previous Robin. If you know the comic storyline, Jason Todd, the first Joker, Dick Grayson, the first Robin, Dick Grayson, he becomes Nightwing, and then Jason Todd dies, but I think in some iterations he becomes like a Joker kind of character. But in any case, Eisenberg and the whole Lex Luthor plot makes very little sense. It's very convoluted and very weird and wasn't necessary. In general, I don't think the whole Doomsday thing was necessary at all here. We didn't need a big monster battle at the end. This was more about establishing Batman and Superman and getting them to I don't think we needed a big dumb monster fight in this. What else can I say about this? We can go a little back to the beginning. Okay, so I thought the movie started. There's some, like I said, there's some good elements here. There's some good character ideas. There's some good plot ideas. But the way they don't really just fit together, you know, they're just kind of pressed together. It's like an ice cream sundae with pickles and a hamburger mixed in it, you know, like things that are good on their own, but like just you would never put them in the same thing. It has a very good iteration of the Batman backstory, the Wayne couple's murder and his sort of transformation into Batman. It has a pretty good, I thought, depiction of the Battle of Metropolis from Man of Steel from Bruce Wayne's perspective. You really get the sense that he's terrified of Superman and also furious with him, and you also, to a lesser extent, sort of understand Superman's problem with Batman. It's almost like he's projecting his own insecurities about hurting people and stuff onto Batman. Wonder Woman's all right. Her role in it isn't giant. We're going to get more of her in her own solo movie. Other characters, I thought Holly Hunter did a good job as that senator. That scene is a scene. This is a spoiler, but the scene in the hearings where, you know, Lex Luthor basically blows up the Capitol building. That I thought was a terrific scene, a very Heath Ledger Joker scene, which is, you know, something's going to happen, right? Because you know Lex gave the wheelchair to that guy. You know he's up to something. And then she looks down at her desk and she sees the jar of urine and it says Grandma's peach tea or whatever, which is like a callback to their discussion. And she realizes that she's fucked. That scene is really great. But again, not like, And then that whole thing went nowhere. He just blew up the Capitol building because she didn't want him to import the kryptonite, which then Batman stole anyway. And then after that, he pretended like that was his plan all along. He was like, he basically acted like, oh, I'm going to kidnap Martha Kent and I'm going to force Superman to go kill Batman, knowing that Batman has the kryptonite and he's going to kill Superman. But what, did he plan for Batman to go kill 15 of his men and steal the kryptonite in a huge dumb car chase? Or did his plan change? Was he going to do it initially? But then after Batman stole the thing, he was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do now. Like, my plan's going to shift, and now I'm going to conceive a way to get them to fight. I don't know. It wasn't really explained. There was that whole thing in the beginning, the whole investigation that led Lois to realize that Lex was that whole white Portuguese thing. Also, there was no reason for it. That whole thing in the beginning in Africa, and then they didn't really explain well. After I saw the movie, I explained to the people I saw it with, because I understood it, but they didn't, what had happened there, which was that Superman came and saved Lois Lane, and then after they left, the comrades of the rebels that he had killed came by and killed all the townspeople as like a retaliation. And that was basically Superman's fault. And the U.S. government was like, look, you can't just go around saving your girlfriend and not giving a shit about what happens after you leave. And that was where that whole Jonathan Kent story about the flood came in. It was like a parable. He was telling the story about how his farm was flooded when he was a kid, and he worked hard to save his farm by digging a trench, and his grandmother baked him a hero cake, but he didn't know that by digging that trench, they just sent the water downstream to the next farm. And he was like, as I was eating my hero cake, the farm next door, their horses were drowning. So it's all about, like, you come by, you save Lois, you swoop up, you go away. But there's a whole aftermath to your actions that you don't even care about. And you're this rogue. We don't control you. Nobody controls you. But that was very poorly explained. It was very poorly explored. It almost felt like they were trying to set up this idea that Lex Luthor was framing Superman for things. But then he didn't. He didn't frame him for the Capitol building explosion. He didn't frame him for the Africa thing. The Nairobi incident, it was just like people were annoyed that Superman was just doing what he wanted, and sometimes people got hurt as a collateral, as a peripheral incident. Didn't really get that whole thing. I mean, I get why he created Doomsday, but then there was also this just brief 1 second, trying to show you that, he tries, the first thing he tries to do is tries to kill Lex Luthor, and then Superman stops him. He created this monster that he can control. But what did he think was going to happen? Was he just trying to create him and control him? There's never really any time spent on any of that stuff. Now, a couple of other things that I found kind of obnoxious. There was some obvious and annoying product placement in a few places. And I generally don't mind that stuff, but if it's annoying, it's annoying. Another thing that annoyed me was its overuse of real people from the media. It had Andrew Sullivan, and it had Anderson Cooper, and it had Neil deGrasse Tyson, and it had Nancy Grace and Soledad O'Brien, and the PBS guy, was it Ted Koppel? I can't remember. Some other guy. It had 6 or 7 or 8 real newscasters, and seeing a real news person in a movie used to be kind of cool. Used to go oh wow, they got this guy to read these goofy lines about Superman. Now it just feels like these news people just want to be in a Hollywood movie. So if they're asked, they'll immediately say yes. Whereas there used to be some kind of sort of, I guess, professional pride where if you got someone to do that, it was an achievement. There was also a little bit of shoehorned attempts to make you realize that nobody was really getting hurt, like no innocent people were getting hurt. People saying stuff like, "Don't worry, it's nighttime. There's nobody in that building, or that island's uninhabited that just blew up." Stuff like that. Just kind of annoying and sort of knee jerk reactionary because people got upset. Yeah. So, look, going forward, I think that if they sit down after this and try to understand what it is that people don't like about this, and also understand what people do like about this, because again, this movie's getting trashed, but most of the trashing that I see acknowledges that this wasn't super far removed from being a good movie. It wasn't, but it also wasn't like some movies you see and you're like, like Fantastic Four, okay? Fantastic Four, for it to have been a good movie, would require a huge change of everything. Here, not so much. Had a lot of good elements going for it. Like I said, it wasn't boring. It had some good. It was well cast. It was well designed. Even the story, as I said, had some good ideas and some good beats in terms of the motivation, what motivates different characters, and what events kind of move the story along. It just didn't click, and in a big way. Like it really didn't click. So if they sit down after this and they examine what it is that they did right and what it is that they did wrong, and they make a concerted effort to preserve the good and to improve the bad, I do think that there's hope for the future of the DC universe. I still think Suicide Squad's going to be a great movie. I still think Wonder Woman's going to probably be a pretty good movie. I don't know about Aquaman. I don't know about that stuff. That was also, by the way, very shoehorned. I didn't think that we needed specifically to see those little clips of the Flash and Cyborg and Aquaman. I thought that the fact that LexCorp's computers had the logos for each of them was really stupid, but I would even give them a pass. But again, it felt too retconned. It felt, if we had already known who Cyborg was, if we had already known who Aquaman was, if they made a Wonder Woman movie and it had come out before this, and in it we had seen Aquaman briefly, because Wonder Woman hints that she has fought. In this movie, she says, Superman says something like, or Batman says something like, "It's not from this world," and Wonder Woman says, "I know. Don't trust me. I've killed things from other worlds before." So like she's clearly been in league, in this world of like fighting mystical creatures and otherworldly beings. So if there was a Wonder Woman movie previously, and in it we maybe saw Aquaman a little, and then maybe there was a Batman movie and there was a little Flash cameo in it, or a little Cyborg cameo in it, maybe a second Superman movie, and then we would have come to this, and we would have had a little bit of like, oh, I know him from there. I've said this before. When you see Civil War, this trailer to Civil War, did I say this episode? This, because I recorded this in two parts, I might be repeating a few things that I had said yesterday again. Forgive me if that's true. If when you see the trailer for Civil War, you look at Ant-Man, you go, I know him from that Ant-Man movie. And oh, look, it's Captain America and Bucky. I know them from the Captain America movies. And there's Iron Man, and there's War Machine. I know them from the Iron Man movies. And there's Scarlet Witch and Vision. I know them from Age of Ultron. And you there's this established background, and you also know the relationships between them. You know what has transpired between Cap and Bucky, and you know that Scarlet Witch hates Stark's guts, and you know Hawkeye and Natasha, Black Widow, they have a history. You know all these things already. They don't have to be explained to you. That's why the Avengers worked so well. It didn't have to waste time reintroducing you to Thor and to Captain America and to Iron Man. All it needed to do was be like, well, there's Iron Man. Whoop, there's Captain America. You already know them. Here they are coming together. This didn't have that, and it forced it in really awkward ways that just didn't work. And this goes back to what I said way at the beginning. They rushed this universe, and you can't rush something like this. The Avengers, every success that Marvel has had after Iron Man, which actually isn't that much. You know what? If you throw Guardians of the Galaxy aside for a second, because it doesn't play into that larger Marvel universe, you only have really like 2.5 really good movies. The Winter Soldier and the first Avengers movie. Ant-Man's pretty good. The first Captain America's pretty good. Age of Ultron's pretty good. That's about it. So even with all of that pre-work that Marvel put in, they're still trying to find their rhythm. And not everything they do is a home run. So for DC to think that they can score a home run, it's like they tried to make the Avengers before, like imagine if the next movie after Iron Man was Avengers, and it tried to introduce Captain America out of the blue and just bring about Iron Man, whatever. Introduce Captain America out of the blue and bring in, the Hulk and bring in Thor and bring in all these characters in suddenly and just try to quickly kind of establish them and quickly explain to you why this character feels this way about that character and why this character feels this way about that character. And then also have them fight each other and fight a monster all in 2.5 hours. You'd be like, that'll never work. Like I said, the Avengers works because there's a lot of groundwork that went into it. But maybe now that there's some groundwork, and we're going to get more groundwork because Suicide Squad's going to have some more Batman backstory in it a little bit, and Wonder Woman's a Wonder Woman movie. Maybe by the time we get to Justice League, there's going to be some good groundwork done, and then maybe we will be able to like set aside some time to just do plot. And if that happens, we might get some good stuff in it. And I'll keep saying this. This had potential in many ways. I thought the music was really good, even though it was a little, again, overwrought, a little too dramatic all the time. Oh, it's like Hans Zimmer and his whole, like, everything's like end of the world music. But I still thought the really dramatic beats had some really good music behind it. And Zack Snyder, as always, is a very visual director, and I like his visuals and I like his visual sensibility. But DC really needs a Kevin Feige. They really need someone to grab the reins there and be the boss and be the guy who calls the shots. And they need to really establish a direction and follow through with it and not change things and push things back and try to go back and try to tweak. A lot of parts in this movie felt like they were added on, tacked on later, and that's never a good thing. That rarely works. You need groundwork. And on that note, I think I'm going to end this. I've already gone on for quite a while. But thank you very much for listening. I don't know if I said anything of substance. As I said, it was very hard for me to kind of put into words what I felt about this. I'm sure that in the coming days and weeks, I'm going to be reading some people that I like, listening to some people that I like. There's a podcast. I'm going to plug another podcast, I guess. The Weekly Planet, which is a podcast I listen to religiously. And it comes out on Mondays. It's the official podcast of comicbookmovie.com, I guess, the website, which is a good website for that kind of news. And it's a podcast. It's two guys in Australia who do it and are well versed in the history of comic books, and they know more about these characters than I do and stuff. And I think they often hit on what makes these movies either work or not work. And their podcast comes out on Mondays. So yeah, I think I'm gonna, in the coming days and weeks, I think I'm gonna form more coherent opinions on this. This was just a stream of consciousness thing since I literally watched it, like 4 or 5 hours ago. Yeah. Not a total loss. I think a lot of the hate that this movie gets is by force of momentum. I know people don't like Zack Snyder, and I think people like to sort of magnify the extent of something being either good or bad, especially bad. So if something is it becomes the worst thing ever. But yeah, overall, just not. When is Civil War coming out? Can we just focus on Civil War and maybe Rogue One and not discuss this movie ever again? All right, guys. I'm at Neon Taster. The podcast at Neoncast. Neoncastpod at gmail.com. Thank you for listening and subscribing and sharing and all that stuff. I might once again be going on a 2-week break. I don't think I'll be able to do a podcast next week because of life and stuff. But I will probably be here the week after with more horse shit. So thanks for listening. If you have been listening, and if not, then why am I talking to you?